From trad wife to single mom. I'm going to share with you all the time I found out my husband was cheating on me.
Let's get into the story time.
Oh my goodness. Let's rewind, flash backwards to 2004. I don't even think there was Facebook or iPhones. My husband and myself are 22 years old. We've been married for 2 years because we got married a week after our daughter was born. So we also have a 2-year-old. On top of all of that, my husband was gone for an entire year on a deployment. So we've only spent 1 year out of the 2 years of our marriage together at that point. Crazy. And as soon as he gets back from his deployment, we get papers that we need to move. He's in the Army, so we go from North Carolina to Fort Lewis, Washington State. So we moved there. We didn't know anybody. Both of our families live on the East Coast. It was very adventurous, but when the Army calls you, and you have to go wherever they call you to. You don't really have much of a choice. So we just picked up all of our things and we moved to Washington State, and it was nice to have, to be somewhere new, to try something new, but also have the comfort of having a steady paycheck, being in the military, the steady benefits, and still be in America. We didn't have to go anywhere abroad that was like so far away, because I myself am the one of two, I have 2 sisters, so one of 3 girls, and I'm the only one that has any of the grandchildren in the family. So it's nice to still at least be in America, and kind of easy for people to just fly over and see us if they wanted to. So that was really nice. We quickly settled into living at Fort Lewis. My husband makes friends at work, and subsequently I become friends with these guys' wives. So at least I now have some friends as well. It was so lonely out there in the very beginning when I had no friends and didn't know anybody, but very quickly we found a nice little friend group that we had, and most of them were wives of my husband. Wives of my husband's co-workers. Sorry, not wives of my husband. And we quickly become close with this couple, Josh and Melissa. And those are the real names, because this is 20 years ago. So I'm using real names in this story. No fake names. So Josh and Melissa and my husband and I, we come a little quartet. And we have a 2-year-old. They have about a 2-year-old as well. We have a girl, they have a boy. So it was nice to kind of get the kids together. We can adult talk and have just regular conversations outside of just baby talk, It's always really nice to have those kind of connections, so you're not just talking to yourself and your child all day long. So it was really nice to meet them. They are kind of an unstable couple because Josh isn't very faithful to Melissa, and so there's a lot of chaos and turmoil in their marriage. So we aren't super, super, super close with them, but we're pretty close with them, and we hang out with them kind of often, but also we were the family or the house that kind of liked to host. So we would also have Josh and Melissa over with other couples that my husband knew from work. So sometimes they would be over, but wasn't always just the 4 of us hanging out. So Josh and Melissa, myself and my husband become close. My husband knows that Josh is cheating on Melissa, but he doesn't really seem to want to do anything about that, as far as telling Melissa and trying to encourage her to leave Josh or anything. And maybe it's not his place, but also now that I think about this, that's probably a red flag on me, because I didn't really do much, but I honestly didn't know about the cheating too much until it was brought to my attention when they had a blowout fight at our home and Josh tried to punch out Melissa's car windows. That's when I realized that the cheating was real, and I felt really bad for her. And then I make other friends. I make other friends with this girl named Jen and her husband. Her husband and my husband don't work together, and they don't even know each other. They work different MOSs, different jobs. And so I met Melissa doing kid things with my eldest child, like story time at the library or the park or something like that. I met her doing that. But I think she's pretty cool, and we become friendly. And all of us would hang out. Sometimes she would even come over when Josh and Melissa were over. She'd come over with her husband and stuff like that. And shortly after getting settled into Fort Lewis, we decided that we are ready to try for a second kid. We really always wanted 2 kids, and kind of 2 and done. And it'd be the 4 of us, little family. And I thought everything was great in our marriage, and I thought it was a perfect time to start trying to have another child. Well, very quickly I got pregnant. Probably within a week or 2, I got pregnant. It was exciting and scary because, I don't know, I'm still so young at that time. I'm only 22, and here I am about to be a mom of 2. Just so scary, but also so exciting. And I was really excited to become a mom of 2, as much as I was scared of it. And I felt like we were ready, we were good as a couple, and we were starting to build a foundation now that he was back and wouldn't be deployed for a little bit. So going along, I'm pregnant for a few months. We're all hanging out with Josh, Melissa, Jen. Jen's husband gets deployed, and Jen decides that she doesn't want to live on her own with her daughter that she has. So she decides that she's going to move in with one of the other wives that their husbands work together. And so they're going to move in together with they each have 1 daughter. And so they just thought that would be fun. Both of their daughters are around the same age, and they are hanging out all the time. And so their children really know each other well and really close. And they thought that would be really fun. And it seemed really fun to live kind of like with a friend, but you didn't have the money problems of, having to live with like a roommate. They didn't really need to. They kind of just wanted to. They ended up getting a pretty decently sized house, and they were always hosting us over and friends over and stuff like that they knew, because we never knew anybody that they worked with. So anytime we went over there, it was like we were meeting all these people that we never even knew. Somewhere down the line, I started to get a little suspicious. Red flags were going off in my head. But I also did try to ignore them just because I thought, nah, my husband would never do that. Like, I don't have anything to worry about. I'm pregnant. He wouldn't do anything like that to me while I'm pregnant. That's what I kept thinking. But my suspicion and red flag was that Jen and my husband were taking a class at the same time at the community college. My husband had always expressed an interest in getting his college degree, and he wanted to go NCO, which is like some kind of officer level within the military. So he always wanted to become an officer, just be more money for our family, and maybe some more kind of like perks or benefits to being an officer versus being enlisted. Thing is, he never even graduated to this day from college. So this is why I look back and think this is a red flag also, when I was living in the moment thinking it was a red flag. So Jen and my husband are taking like an English class together. He has a book, and he calls me like on his breaks from the class. It lasts, an hour or 2, an hour and a half, something like that. Nothing crazy. It was never gone for too long where I thought it was like very suspicious or anything like that. But when I look back, I don't really know if he was actually taking that class, and if he bought the book as like a cover up, and that he was actually just going to have sex with Jen. I don't really know. But they spark up a sexual relationship. And this is before social media, like I said, before iPhones and all of that. So you couldn't just deep dive someone on Facebook like you can now and try to piece together some storyline, or even just like message somebody on social media and see if they're low down dirty on doing dirty things on you or anything like that. You couldn't do that back then. So everything is going along. I don't realize anything other than the suspicion of them taking the class together, but everything seemed fine. Jen would still come over and we would go over there even though her husband was gone, and it would never just be them hanging out that I knew of. You know, it would always be the three of us with our girl and her girl, and sometimes her friend Candace and their daughter would also hang out with us. So it was never a thing that she was just coming over to our house and it was just him and I was like gone doing stuff. It was never like that, at least from what I could tell, but clearly something was happening behind the scenes and I had no idea, and he was having a full-blown affair with Jen. And I found out one day when Melissa, she's coming back into the story, on a random Tuesday around lunchtime, she comes to my home and she's like knocking on my door and she's like, Rachel, I have something to tell you. I'm like, girl, come inside. What's going on? And she proceeds to tell me, did you know that your husband's cheating on you with Jen? And I am livid and I am distraught and I am also still pregnant. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is too much stress for the baby. But I'm like, what do I do? I've never been in this kind of scenario before. I hadn't really dated much before I had met and got pregnant and married my husband. So I didn't really have any experience with being broken up with or any really experience but with being cheated on, at least that I knew of. I mean, my ex-husband or my ex-boyfriends could have cheated on me, but they kept it under wraps, and I was pretty naive growing up in a home where we didn't talk about anything really, except for surface level kind of stuff. So I was pretty naive when I got to be 22 years old and in a full marriage with a child and another one on the way. But I just remember being like devastated in the moment. What do I do? And just everything. I was so frantic. I call my husband a million times. I'm blowing up his phone. He finally calls me back and says he is at a work meeting. And he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, are you cheating on me with Jen? Like, Melissa's over here and telling me this. And do I need to believe her? And, you know, like, what's going on? I don't even remember everything I said on the phone. And he gaslights me. He gaslights me into believing that this is not true. And you know Josh cheats on Melissa all the time. She's probably just trying to get back at you because she knows that we have a good relationship and they don't, and blah, blah, blah. I had nothing to do with their marriage because I was loyal and I never even wanted Josh. He wasn't even attractive to me or anything. So I had no reason to think that Melissa was trying to get back at me. For what? Melissa and I were kind of homies at a point where we would go and hang out with just the two of us with our kids. Sometimes we got even that close. So I just felt like there was no reason for Melissa to be lying to me. So I just thought that was kind of odd. But, you know, when you're being gaslit and you don't really know what's the truth because you don't have any evidence, like, you know, and everything's coming out of the blue. Like, it was so scary and I just didn't understand what was going on. My husband comes home immediately after that phone call. He takes the rest of the afternoon off. He's coming home. He's reassuring me that everything is fine and gaslighting me, the freak. Like, he's so much gaslighting me to believing that this isn't true. Why would I ever do that to you? Blah, blah, blah. Eventually, it only took him a couple of weeks, and he eventually admits to it. And I think it's because he's just so tired of covering up. But during those few weeks and few months after the phone call, I would stand in our master bedroom window and I would watch him go and get in Jen's car like early Saturday morning And he would stay gone all day long, leaving me pregnant and at home by ourselves with our daughter. Just the two of us girlies and the baby in my belly. And he would just get in Jen's car and go all day long. He wouldn't come home until like 9 or 10 o'clock at night when he was freaking so drunk. Drunk as a skunk. Plop himself into bed to do it all over again. So basically, our daughter and myself and the baby in my belly were home alone for hours and hours and days, and we were already home alone all day while he was at work. And then he was gone almost every single weekend all day long, hanging out with Jen and her child. And I felt so angry because we have a child and can't even hang out with our child. If he doesn't want to hang out with me, at least he could hang out with her and do fun things with her, you know. But we lived in the same home, and we slept in the same bed, but we basically were operating like roommates during this time. He admits that he's cheating. He doesn't stop cheating. He still continues with the affair, and it really broke me up inside to watch him leave and not want to hang out with our child and not even want to hang out with me. And here I am pregnant, and what's going to happen to our marriage? I'm going to be a single mom. How am I going to afford that? I don't have a college degree. Like, all these crazy thoughts running through my brain at literally all times of the day. I am already an anxious person. Set aside this time period of my life when my anxiety really wanted to hyperdrive because of all of this. And I do believe all of this stress of this caused our daughter that I was pregnant with at the time to have a hole in her heart, because it didn't, when I was first pregnant, she didn't have a hole in her heart. And a couple months down the line, once the cheating allegations came out and he was confessing to this, but I kept seeing him leave, we had, multiple checkups with the pregnancy. And at one of the checkups, we found out that our daughter had a hole in her heart. And we had a very serious sit down with the doctor, and he told me everything that I should and shouldn't be doing. And I was basically doing everything that he was telling me. He didn't tell me I had to be on bed rest or anything like that. So I was basically doing everything that he said. But my husband he kind of woke up in that moment and realized, oh crap, we can lose our child. And I already have an uncle that I never got to meet because he died really early on in his life. I don't even think he made it into his teenage years, because he died because of a hole in his heart. And I don't really know too much about that, but she had a hole in her left atrium. And eventually that did close up. I kind of tried to de-stress myself. My husband realized this is really serious, and he kind of broke off the affair, at least so I thought. And we tried to work on our marriage and at least try to hold it together until, our daughter was born, where we could figure out what we really wanted to do, and made it through the pregnancy without losing almost a full-term baby. That would have been absolutely devastating. I'm just so thankful that my little angel baby pulled through, and she's 19 years old now, and she's doing perfectly fine. So thank goodness for all of that. But that was stressful time in my life. And even now to this day, I kind of feel guilty about that time in my life, even though none of that was my fault. And I would never think that someone cheating on me would be my fault. That's a flaw within them. At least that's how I kind of see it now. I took so much of it out on myself at the time. I actually kind of begged him to come back to the marriage and come back to the family, because my parents are still married. So I just always thought, like, once you get married, you don't really get divorced, and you can work through anything and everything, even cheating. That's what I kind of thought. Little did I know our marriage was not going to survive that, because about 2 years later, we decided to actually split. And he actually just texted me that he didn't want to be married to me. But that's a whole nother story. We can get into that in another story time. But things worked out the way they were supposed to, and I'm so thankful for that time in my life. But it was a very tumultuous time in my life, and I don't really have any pictures. That's why I feel a lot of guilt, because my daughter will always ask me, why don't you have pictures of me in your belly, or why don't you have pictures of me when I was a baby and stuff like that. And there are some, but not very many at all, and it's because I don't want to look at those pictures and remember that god-awful time in my life. So I feel a lot of shame and guilt around not having those memories, and I feel like I should have just eaten crow at the moment and taken as many photos as I could. But also, we didn't really have camera phones like we have now, where everybody's popping on and taking selfies and videos and social media and all of that. We didn't really have that back in 2004. And then I also had a husband that didn't care for me and didn't love me, so he wasn't taking photos of me. You know what I mean? So I was going to be left to having my 2-year-old take the photos, or I take the photos of myself. And I just didn't really take selfies or anything like that back then. I don't remember ever posing for a selfie. So, but I hope by me sharing my story makes somebody else not feel alone. Thanks for listening to my story time, and I'll see you next time. Bye.